Welcome to the 12th and final episode of the Builder's Playbook journey. And honestly, if you are here right now, I just want to say this first. Thank you. Because if you watched this whole series, or even if you found it somewhere in the middle and stayed with it, that already tells me something about you. It tells me that you are not just here to consume random motivation and forget it in 5 minutes later or something like this. You are here because something in you wants to build something meaningful, wants to create something real in this world. A YouTube channel, a business, a body of work, a brand, a path, a life that feels more honest and more yours. And over these 12 episodes, we did not just talk about tactics, we talked about the inner reality of building. We talked about choosing direction, developing skills, respecting proof, reading signals, surviving boring work, resuming instead of restarting, carrying loneliness, and becoming the kind of person who can actually stay with something long enough for it to become real. And if you really think about that, that is not smart because building something meaningful in this world is not just about wanting more. It is about becoming responsible for the thing you say you want to create. It is about learning how to think more clearly, how to act before you feel fully ready, how to keep going when the emotional high fades, how to stop waiting for perfect conditions, and how to provide some kind of value in the world instead of only dreaming about the life you could have. So if you have stayed with this series, I'm genuinely proud of you. Not in some fake motivational way, I really mean it. Because you are clearly someone who is thinking deeply about your path. You're trying to build something you could one day be proud of when you look back on it. You are trying to create something that could matter, not only to you, but maybe to other people too. And that deserves my deepest respect. So before we go into this final episode, I want you to understand something. This series is always here for you. If you get stuck later, come back to it. If you lose direction, come back to it. If you start over too many times, come back. If the path gets lonely, quiet, confusing, or slower than you hoped it would be, come back to those videos here. Watch it again from the beginning if you need to. Not because every episode has the perfect answer for every situation, but because this playlist can become a kind of a reset point. A place to remind yourself what building actually asks from you. A place to get clarity again when the world gets loud and your own path starts feeling blurry. And after everything we talked about in this journey, there's really only one thing left to say in this final episode. Keep building. At the end of such a series like this, there's always this temptation to make everything sound finished. Like there should be one final framework or one final answer, one perfect sentence that pulls the whole thing together and makes the path feel clean. And honestly, that would be pretty nice. It would be nice if building something real worked like that. You watch the lessons, understand the process, find the strategy, fix the mindset, and from that point on, everything becomes easier, right? But building does not work like that. That's not the real way of building. It does not become easy because you understand it better. It does not stop testing you because you made it to the final episode. And it definitely does not turn into some perfect straight line just because you now have better words for what the path actually is. If anything, understanding the path makes the responsibility more real because now you know. You know that clarity does not remove uncertainty. You know that motivation does not replace repetition. You know that starting over can become an escape. Or you know that proof matters more than fantasy. You know that boring work is not a sign that the path is dead. You know that lonely seasons are not always failure. And you know that building is not just about the thing you create, but about the person you become while you keep returning to it. And once you know that, the question is no longer what is the secret? The question becomes much quieter and much harder, to be honest. Are you actually going to live this? That is maybe the most honest way to close the builder's playbook. Not with a hype, not with a dramatic final push, not with some fake promise that if you apply everything perfectly, your life changes overnight. The real message is simpler than that. You still have to build, you still have to return, you still have to choose the work when it stops feeding you, you still have to protect your attention when the world gets loud, and you still have to improve your skills when nobody's impressed yet. That is the work. It was always the work. And that may sound almost disappointing because part of you probably wants building to eventually become emotionally convenient. You want the point where the resistance disappears, where the uncertainty becomes small, where the proof is obvious enough that you never doubt again. But that point does not really come in the way you imagine it. What changes is not that the path stops asking things from you. What changes is that you stop being so shocked when it does. You stop threatening every slow phase like a personal insult. You stop treating every hard week like proof that you choose the wrong thing. And you stop expecting that the process to constantly flatter you. You begin to meet it with more maturity. That is the big shift. In the beginning, you want certainty. You want to know the right niche, the right offer, the right path, the right vehicle, the right move, the right strategy, right? And that makes sense. When you do not want to drift anymore, uncertainty feels expensive. So you search, you think, you compare, you try to you try to reason your way to a place where action finally feels safe. But if you stay on the path long enough, you realize something important. Certainty is not the real foundation. Capacity is. Capacity to choose before the whole map is visible. Capacity to act before you feel fully ready. Capacity to stay with repetition. Capacity to learn from proof. Or to survive imperfect weekends. To keep building when the emotional reward is not immediate. That is what this whole series has really been about. On the surface, yes, it has been about building, absolutely. A channel, a business, a brand, a self directed path, a life with more ownership and more freedom. But underneath all of that, it has been about your relationship with reality. Can you stop living in ideas and start respecting proof? Can you stop waiting for the perfect identity and start developing skills? Can you stop confusing motion with progress? Can you stop chasing novelty and begin reading signals? Can you stop demanding that feeling that feels exciting and learn to respect the boring work that actually compounds? Because building something real requires a different relationship with reality than most people are used to. Most people want the emotional high of building. They want the vision, the identity, the clean beginning, the feeling that this time is different. And that part is powerful, but it is not enough. The path eventually becomes much more practical than that. It becomes the morning where you still have to write, the afternoons where you still have to edit, or the week where you still have to publish. The moment where the result is not as strong as you hoped it would be, and you have to decide whether to learn from it or emotionally disappear. Building asks you to become less dramatic with the process, less easily thrown off, less dependent on every step feeling meaningful in the moment. That does not mean you have to become cold. It means you become steadier. And steadiness is probably one of the most underrated builder traits there is. Everyone talks about ambition or about ideas or about strategy, but the person who can stay steady through repetition, uncertainty, small proof, and delayed recognition has an advantage most people underestimate. Because most people do not lose because they had no potential. They lose because they could not stay in relationship with the work long enough for the potential to become real. And that phrase matters. Stay in relationship with the work, not control it perfectly, not obsess over it every second, not turn your whole life into some exhausting performance of seriousness. Just stay in relationship with it. Do not disappear when it gets quiet. Do not abandon it when it becomes repetitive. Do not keep replacing the path with a new fantasy every time the current one asks for patience. Do not trade long term compounding for short term emotional relief over and over again. Keep the thread. That is what building asks you. That is what building is all about. And if there's one thing I hope this series gave you, it is language for the path. Because when you do not have language for what is happening, every hard phase feels like a personal failure. You think you are lost when you are just early. You think nothing is happening when proof is still forming. You think the path is dead when the work simply became boring. Or you think you need to restart when you really need to resume. You think the loneliness means you choose wrong when maybe it just means the outside world has not caught up yet. Your language matters and your self talk in your head matters because it turns confusion into something you can actually carry. That does not make the path easy, but it makes it less mysterious. And what becomes less mysterious becomes easier to continue. That is the value of understanding this process. Not that you will never struggle again, you will. Not that you will never adopt again. You probably will. Not that you will never compare, overthink, lose rhythm, or feel impatient. You probably will have all of those things. But the goal was never to become flawless. The goal was to become harder to knock out to the process, to recognize the season without immediately turning it into an identity crisis, to recover faster, return cleaner, and to keep building with less panic and more honesty. So, if you zoom out over the whole builder's playbook, the progression is actually simple. First, you stop drifting long enough to admit that you want something more real. Then, you choose direction instead of worshipping endless potential. And then you develop skills instead of waiting for your identity. You face the psychology that keeps you cycling the work instead of entering it. Then you begin before you fully feel ready and you respect first proof instead skipping mentally to the big future. Then you stop chasing endless ideas and begin noticing signals. You learn to respect boring work and you stop starting over every time friction appears. And then you become the kind of person who can carry a builder's path from the inside. You learn how to handle the loneliness of building before the proof is visible enough for the world to fully understand. And after all of that, the final message becomes simple: keep building. Not because it is always easy, not because every day will feel clear, not because every video, every project or decision or every week will immediately make sense. Keep building because the alternative is drifting. Keep building because the work is how you learn. Keep building because proof only appears when reality has something to respond to. Because the version of you who can carry a meaningful life does not appear through fantasy. He appears through return, through repetition, through staying close to what matters when it no longer feels new. That is the quiet beauty of this path. A lot of people wanted the transformation to feel dramatic while it is happening. But so much of real transformation feels ordinary in the moment. It looks like showing up again, improving one piece, recording another episode, making the offer clearer, or studying what worked, adjusting what didn't, protecting your attention, coming back after a messy week, publishing before everything feels perfect, and letting small proof become information instead of letting it become some kind of disappointment. None of those points look like a movie, but over time it becomes alive. And this one is important. Keeping building does not mean forcing the same exact path forever. It does not mean you never change direction. It does not mean you stay loyal to a dead idea because you are afraid of pivoting. Builders do adjust, they evolve, they read signals, they refine, they let proof shape the next move. But there is a difference between evolving and escaping. Evolving comes from evidence, escape comes from discomfort. Evolving makes the path sharper. Instead, escape resets the same pattern again and again. The point is not to never change. The point is to stop abandoning the process before it has had a real chance to teach you. So from here, the question is not how do I become perfect now? The real question here is what do I return to now? One real path, one real season, one real next step. Maybe it is publishing each week. Maybe it is improving your craft or making your offer clearer, talking to real people, studying your proof more honestly. Or maybe it is building your system, your audience, your skills, your consistency, or your courage. It does not need to look impressive yet. It needs to be real. Because once something is real, it can be improved. And once it can be improved, it can compound over time. That is one of the deepest lessons here. You do not need to figure out the whole future before taking the next real step. You do not need to know what every season after this will look like. You do not need to have the next perfect series, that the next perfect idea or perfect identity already locked in. You need to stay alive to the process. Keep listening, keep creating, keep learning, keep letting the work show you what the next version needs to become. That is how builder path often unfolds, not as one perfect plan revealed from the beginning, but as a relationship with reality that gets more honest over time. And that feels like the right way to talk about this channel from here. The Builder's Playbook ends with this episode, but Riova does not. This was one chapter, and honestly, a very meaningful one to me. But the self mastery series continues, and the create the realities for all the people out there who are building a YouTube channel continues. And even if you do not fully know yet what comes after the Builder's Playbook here, I know there will always be something here for people who are trying to build something, create something, grow or understand themselves, and shape a life that actually feels true. The inner work and the outer work. Maybe the format changes. Maybe a new series appears. Maybe the next chapter looks different than this one. But the center stays the same. Honest videos for people who want to build something real without losing themselves in the process. So if this is the first series you found here or the first video you watched from me, stay around. If the builder side speaks to you, you will still find that thread in future videos. If you want to go deeper into your own patterns, your discipline, your standards, your inner world, the self-mastery series is there for you. If you care about creative path, the emotional side of making things, building and publishing, and what it actually feels like to create when nobody has fully understood the journey of a YouTube channel yet, the creator reality is still continuing too. The Builder's Playbook may be closing, but the mission is still alive. And personally, I want to say this probably. Thank you for watching this series. Truly. Recording the Builder's Playbook has been a blast. It has been one of those projects that made me think more deeply about my own path too. Not just about what I wanted to say to you. Every episode forced me to put language to something that is usually felt more than explained. The uncertainty, the proof, the boredom, the loneliness, this restarts, the need to keep returning. And if even one episode helped you feel less alone in your own process or helped you take your path a little more serious, then this series did what it was supposed to do. Because at the end of the day, this was never just about business. It was never just about the content or the videos. It was never just about the strategy. It was about becoming someone who can carry something meaningful in this work. Someone who can stay with the process, who can keep the thread when the path is quiet, who can build without needing every step to be validated immediately. And this is what I hope you carry with you beyond this final episode. Not just information, not just inspiration, a different relationship with the path. So maybe the last question of this whole journey is simple. What are you willing to keep building, even when it no longer feels new? Not what sounds impressive, not what gives you a quick emotional high. What are you actually willing to return to? What still feels real after the excitement fades? What path deserves your patience, your proof, your skill, your attention, and your repetition? Start here. Keep the thread, come back to this YouTube series whenever you need to remember what building asks from you. And wherever the next chapter leads, keep building.